Why is South Africa still struggling with the unemployment even though we have resources, industries and policies in place? And what exactly is government doing to grow the industries and create jobs? Now, this section is very important for your exams because it links directly to economic growth, economic development and job creation. So today we are breaking it down clearly. Welcome to grade 12 economics at Homeschooling Adventures, and in this particular video we are going to be looking at a brand new high weighting topic under economic pursuits, which is known as the industrial development policies in South Africa. Now perhaps let's start by looking at what we mean by industrial development. Now, industrial development refers to the deliberate growth and expansion of industries, specifically within the secondary sector of the economy. This includes through manufacturing sector, processing of the raw materials and producing finished goods. Instead of exporting raw materials to developed nations, South Africa aims to add value locally before exporting the goods. In economics, we call this beneficiation or value addition. For example, instead of exporting raw gold or iron ore, we process it into specialized machinery. Or instead of exporting raw agricultural products, we can process it into packaged foods like tinned fish or tinned beans. Now, someone will be asking, why is this important? Now, industrial development is the ultimate engine to the creation of sustainable employment because it also helps us in increasing export earnings. It also adds value to the primary sector resources, and then it also helps in promoting stable economic growth if we are to achieve the export-led economic growth. So that's why it is important. Now, why does South Africa desperately focus on industrial development? Maybe will be the question that will be on one's mind. The answer to that is very simple. Because our economy faces the triple challenge, which is the high unemployment, poverty, and extreme inequality. By expanding factories, we can absorb low-skilled labor, reduce our reliance on volatile commodity exports, and also improve our global competitiveness.
At the heart of this strategy are South Africa's priority sectors: agriculture and agro-processing, clothing and textiles, mining and metals, automotive, chemicals and pharmaceuticals, poultry, steel, infrastructure, and energy. These industries are central to the work of the DTIC, unlocking new exports, investment, and innovation.
Now, this industrial growth does not happen automatically. The government guides its development through specific policies and strategies. Now, grab your notebook because these names and dates are pure exam gold. We'll start by looking at the first one, National Industrial Policy Framework. This policy was introduced by the Department of Trade and Industry in August 2007. And this Department of Trade and Industry is the one that we popularly know as the DTI. Okay, and the purpose of introducing the NIPF was to provide long-term strategic framework for structural changes in the South African economy. Now, it heavily focused on diversification, which was moving away from the traditional mining and agricultural economies, to intensification, which was promoting the labor-intensive manufacturing sectors, for example, the textile industry, as well as the automotive industry. And then we also needed to bring inclusion in this, which means we needed to bring in the marginalized groups into the mainstream industrial production. Okay, and then we also need integration, which was aligning our local trade with global value chains. So it sought to focus on 4 key focus areas. The first one, we said we needed to move from traditional mining and agriculture. We also needed to go to promoting labor-intensive industries which are operating in the manufacturing sector. And then the third one, we said we needed to assist in moving the marginalized groups into the mainstream industrial production. And then we also needed to achieve integration, which was aligning our local trade with the global value chains. So those were the 4 key focus areas. You need to, if you have missed them, you need to replay a bit so that you understand this, and it's important. Now, the key idea that you need to understand as learners is you need to think of NIPF as a master visionary blueprint. In other words, it tells us where we are going. In other words, it's a plan, it's a framework that is telling us where we want to be. Okay? And then to try and achieve this vision of the NIPF, they had to do the implementation of it. Now, let's move from vision to implementation. In 2007, the Department of Trade and Industry launched the Industrial Policy Action Plan, which we now know as IPAP 1, and it was mainly focused on immediate to short-term actions. Okay, and then in 2011, they introduced IPAP 2, which was the second phase of our Industrial Policy Action Plan, and it expanded the objectives of IPAP 1 to medium-term plans. And then in 2012, which was a year later, and the subsequent years, they introduced what is now known as the Industrial Policy Action Plan number 3, which is IPAP 3. And this one was in 2012, and it then evolved into a continuous 3-year rolling business plans. Okay, so what is the purpose of Industrial Policy Action Plan? Now, Industrial Policy Action Plan was introduced to prevent deindustrialization, and which was the closing of industries. So it was introduced to prevent that. And then it was also introduced to provide specific financial incentives to businesses. And then the third reason why it was introduced was to root out structural constraints like a high energy cost and the railway inefficiencies. Okay? Now, the Industrial Policy Action Plan, it targeted, or it continues to target, specific clusters for growth. And the first cluster, or the first group that it focuses on, is the high employment sectors like the clothing sector, the textile sector, as well as the footwear industries. Okay, and then the second cluster, it focuses on the large scale industries like the automotive sector and the chemical manufacturing sector. Okay, and then we also have the third cluster, which is the emerging green technologies and advanced manufacturing. Okay, for example, the automotive production and development program, which was introduced, which is the APDP, it managed to successfully scale up our car manufacturing industry in Port Elizabeth as well as in Pretoria. You need to understand this section this way. NIPF is a plan, is a strategy. Industrial Policy Action Plan is actually the execution of our NIPF. Okay, it's the action plan of our NIPF. Okay, then let's look at the second policy, or the second strategy that was introduced, which is known as the National Research Development Strategy, which is the NRDS. Now, NRDS was introduced in 2002 by the Department of Science and Technology. And the purpose of the National Research and Development Strategy was to focus on boosting the nation's innovation system, increase the local research capacity, and transition South Africa into a knowledge-based economy. And its focus area was allocating at least 1% of the GDP to research and development, which we now know as the R&D. And then also to help develop human capital in science, in engineering and technology. Okay, and then also to create technological business incubators. In other words, we needed to support the technological businesses. And then the fourth last focus area for this was to secure intellectual property rights for local inventions. Okay, so these were the 4 key areas that it focused on. And then why then was this important? It was important because modern global industries, they depend on advanced technology, and without research, South African industries become outdated and they will also not be able to grow. So they needed to introduce that. Now, also introduced in 2002, in April of 2002, they introduced another important strategy, which was called the Integrated Manufacturing Strategy, which is called the IMS. Now, the purpose of the IMS was to drastically accelerate the growth and competitiveness of the manufacturing sector. And the focus area, it had 4 key focus areas that I want you to remember as you write your notes. It needed to increase local productivity and manufacturing output. The second one, it needed to bring support to advanced logistics and infrastructure developments. It also needed to accelerate ICT and adoption across small and medium and macro enterprises. It also needed to boost local export capacity to the international markets, because we wanted to achieve the export-led economic growth. Instead of us exporting raw materials, let's export finished goods. So it's very, very important. Okay, so now the key reasoning behind this is manufacturing is a gold key because it helps us bring massive backward and forward leakages in every other sector. Okay, because if, for example, our manufacturing sector, let's say our textile industry that is in the manufacturing sector, it brings a backward leakage, because for the manufacturing factory to operate and produce cloth, they need to buy cotton, and cotton is provided by the farmer who is operating in the primary sector. So it creates a backward leakage like that, because it links. If we demand more cotton, then the farmer is going to produce more of the cotton so that they can be able to supply us, okay, as a result of an increase in demand. And it would now mean that the farmer then has got to employ more farm workers to be able to produce that. So it creates employment in the backward leakage. That's backward leakage. And then forward leakage, that cloth that we have produced, it is now going to be sold to the factories that are going to be responsible for the manufacturing of the clothes that we are going to put on. So it will now mean that that cloth, it provides raw material, a useful raw material for the subsequent sectors. So it provides a forward leakage. So that's what we mean when you say it provides a backward and forward leakage. Okay, so it's very, very important. So the government then identified those key strategic benefits of these particular industries. So they will target those industries that give us the backward and forward leakages. Okay, let's bring this together. Let's lock this information in our brains for the sake of the exam. Now, industrial development is mainly targeting at expanding the secondary sector to add value. And then also the goal is to tackle unemployment, boost exports, and ensure structural growth. Now, let's perhaps look at the government policy checklist. The NIPF was introduced in 2007, and then it was a long-term framework. Okay, and then IPAP which was the Industrial Policy Action Plan, was introduced as an action plan of NIPF, which was in 2007 for our policy phase 1, and then our phase 2 was introduced in 2011, and then our phase 3 was introduced in 2012, and then it continued as a 3-year rolling plan. Okay, and it was mainly targeting specific clusters of the economy. Okay, and then we also have the National Research Development Strategy, which was the NRDS. It was introduced in 2002, and its main focus area was innovation, technology, and having a knowledge-driven economy. Okay, then in 2002 we had the other one, which was called the Integrated Manufacturing Strategy, and its main focus was to enhance manufacturing and global competitiveness of our locally manufactured goods. Okay, now let's just look at this high value masterclass. I want you to answer this question, so just pause the video, answer this question, and then I'll be back with the answer. Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes to answer this 8-mark question. You can pause the video. Your time starts now. Okay, so let's explain this and let's discuss this as you mark your work. Now, the question here was saying, explain the reasons for industrial development in South Africa, and that one was an 8-mark. Now, what you need to do for you to maximize your marks, you need to make sure that you give me 4 points, and each point is going to be marked 2 marks each, isn't it? So you would need to ensure that when you are answering such 8-mark questions, you give the required number of responses so that you don't disadvantage yourselves in terms of the marks. Because if you give 2 points, you are only going to be marked out up to a maximum of 4. Okay, but this question will be out of 8, so it means you would have lost a lot of other marks as well. So it's important that you give 4 points on 8-mark questions. Ensure that you give 4 points so that you don't miss on these marks. Now the question was saying, explain the reasons for industrial development in South Africa. Okay, so the first reason for industrial development in South Africa is employment creation. Now, expanding the secondary sector, it creates labor-intensive jobs to absorb low-skilled and semi-skilled workers directly, and this helps in combating the high levels of unemployment. Now, the second reason is economic growth. Now, you would know that our manufacturing, it contributes a higher value to our GDP compared to our primary sector extraction industries. Now, this leads to real economic expansion. So by targeting the manufacturing sector, we are able to ensure that we have a higher GDP value, which is what we want as government. If you visit your public sector, one of the objectives of the public sector is achieving economic growth. Okay, so then we'll have achieved economic growth. So if you have spoken of economic growth resulting from the manufacturing sector contributing a higher value to the GDP compared to the primary sector, then accept that as correct. That's 2 marks for you there. Then the other one is it helps us in supporting or promoting exports, and then which also helps us correct our balance of payments. Now, producing high value manufactured goods in South Africa, it allows South Africa to earn foreign currency, and then this will strengthen our trade balance. In other words, our balance of trade. You would remember from your topic number 4, which is foreign exchange, where you looked at balance of trade. If you didn't understand that topic, on the channel there is a video on balance of trade, so I will also add that link on the description below, so that you can then be able to access it from there. And then the fourth objective is it helps in economic diversification. Now, industrialization, it lessens the country's vulnerability to international price shocks or changes on raw commodities like gold and platinum. So if we are able to manufacture these goods, then it means our economy is cushioned or is protected against these these global changes that might happen on the precious metals like gold and platinum. Okay, so those were the 4 answers that we expected. Now let's just lock it in our brains for the exam. We say the first reason why we need industrial development in South Africa is it supports employment creation, and then the second one we said it supports economic growth. The third one we said it facilitates export promotion, and it helps us in maintaining a favorable balance of payment. And then the fourth one we said it helps us with economic diversification, which protects our economy from global or international price shocks, especially as it pertains to the precious metals like gold and platinum. If this topic was confusing at school, this is exactly why this channel exists. We break it down, the complex economic models, and so you can be able to ace your matric exams. Now in part 2, we shift our focus from the national policy to regional development policies. Now we will focus on special economic zones, which is the SEZ, and we will also look at industrial development zones, as well as those corridors. We are going to be looking at them. Okay, now in the context of South Africa, if this helped you clear up your economics notes, like this video, subscribe so you don't miss part 2, and when you subscribe, remember to turn on the notification bell, and then also share this link with your school study group chat or with your friends as well, right? And leave a comment below. Which specific industry do you think South Africa should prioritize to create the most jobs? You can leave your comment in the comment section, your answer in the comment section below. See you in part 2. Have a good day.